My name is Marilyn Patterson. I am the past president of the Association of Wedding Professionals of Greater Washington, D.C. My company is Joyous Events, and I am an event planner. It has been my pleasure for the past, I think this is the fourth time, to moderate the Bridal Focus panel. We have a wonderful group assembled for you this evening. I have already let them know they have had their dinner, and I have let them know that you all will be dining as they eat. So, feel free to continue to eat, listen with your ears, and if you keep the clinking of the forks down to a minimum, you'll all be able to eat and hear at the same time. In last year, I will say this before I bring the couples in. Last year we had 3 couples. As a result of a variety of things that took place, we ask. Sometimes they come. It's totally up to the couple as to whether or not they will actually fulfill our request to have them here. And last year we only had 3 couples. So this time we have 8 couples for you to hear from. We heard you. We got the reviews that indicated you needed to have a little more variety. So we do have a good bit more variety for you to hear from this year. Now, the challenge in having as many as we do is that in order for us to hear from the variety of them, we're going to have, I've already informed them to keep their answers clear and concise, and that if something has already been stated that they agree with, they are free to say ditto. I'm not trying to stifle communication, but just be mindful of the time so that we can ensure we hear what we need to hear and get out in time. Likewise, I'd like to ask you, as your time comes to ask questions, that you do the same. If a question has already been asked, don't ask it again. We are going to, and let me give you a feel for what we're going to do. We are basically going to follow a format that finds out how did they find their vendors, what was that process like, and then after they chose that vendor, what was that experience like? And then in that piece, we will get a little specific. The first is kind of generic, broad brush. How was it? Who did you find? How did you find us? All of the things that you're burning to know, especially as wedding season is soon upon us and you're making advertising decisions and so forth. And then as we get into after you've chosen that vendor, that conversation is going to be more specific to our individual areas of expertise. So listen intently, write your questions, and then at the end I'll ask them, what can we do to improve? How can we make this experience better for future brides? Those are the kinds of things that we're going to follow along. Just so that you will know, I have already provided each of the couples with the same questions that I already have prepared so that they have had an opportunity to think, and that will also help us to move the process along some. Questions that you have will be picked up by Catherine Calvin. Catherine, wait, she's outside. Okay, Catherine will be getting your questions, their tables, paper and pencil. So please feel free to put that in. So right now, I'd like for our couples to come in. I'm going to have them stand behind the table, and then I will introduce them individually as they are seated. Now, I've told them, there you go. I've told them that we're a warm and friendly crowd. Okay. All right. Our first couple. You all know what to do. Our first couple, Aaron Gillery and Jennifer Stiles Gillery, welcome them. They were married, you can be seated. Aaron and Jennifer, were married on May 27th of this year. Their ceremony took place at the Lee Findle House in Virginia. Their budget was $16,000. The do-it-yourself items were flowers, centerpieces, her veil, and welcome them. Our next couple, Chris Neal and Lisa Namata Neal. They were married on August the 6th of 2011 at St. Raymond's Catholic Church. The reception was at the George Mason Inn. They had a $20,000 budget. They used a day of coordinator, and their do-it-yourself items included favors and flowers. Welcome them. Russell Conroy and Katie Glister Conroy were married on, did I say right?
Yep, just Clister.
Okay, Clister, okay. Were married on June 30th of this year. They had their ceremony and their reception at the Sunset Room in Ocean City, Maryland. They had a $20,000 budget, and their do-it-yourself items included flowers and decorations. Welcome them. Adam and Stephanie Grisey were married on August the 4th of this year at St. Louis Catholic Church, and their reception was at Harbor View. They had a $35,000 budget, and their do-it-yourself items included favors. Thank you. Our next couple, Tony and Monet Heath. They were married on May 31st of this year. Their wedding and ceremony and reception took place at Excelente Playa in Riviera Maya, Mexico. March 31st of this year. They had a $25,000 budget. They used a planner, and they did have some do-it-yourself items. We'll find out as the conversation continues. Thank you. Welcome. Wayne and Maria Sharp were married on April 28th of this year. They had their ceremony and their reception at the Hilton Alexandria Old Town. They had a $25,000 budget. And it says here that they didn't do anything themselves. We will have a conversation about that. Welcome them. Nicholas and Rachel Kionis Tedesco were married on January 21st of this year. They had their ceremony and reception at Ceresville Mansion in Maryland. With a $20,000 budget, they used a day of coordinator, and they did their own favors. Welcome. Now, for the first time in AWP history, we have a very, very, very special couple here with us, and everyone at this panel is special. But what we have before us this evening, who we have before us, are Bill and Sarah Josie. Bill and Sarah Josie planned their wedding for their daughter, and we'll hear a whole lot more about that. But as times are changing and as we are dealing with, changing times, what we'll hear from this time is from parents who have done all of the wedding planning on behalf of their child. That wedding took place on May 19th of this year. The ceremony was at St. John's in D.C., and the reception at the Army-Navy Club, also in D.C. They did use a day of coordinator, and they did the flowers themselves. Thank you. Now, as I have shared with our couples, and I will share with you, the reason that we have gathered again this year is to get their advice so we, as wedding industry professionals, can do a better job at reaching out to future brides and grooms, providing answers to the questions that you have, and then so that we can raise the level of the service that we provide. Now, I've shared with them, and if you've not had an opportunity to meet everyone that's in the room, we have seated in this space with us venue and site managers, videographers, photographers, hair and makeup artists, florists and floral preservers, travel agents, designers, publishers, stationery and invitation professionals, linen suppliers, officiants and celebrants, those who do bakery goods and sweets. We have planners and consultants, entertainers, DJs, musicians, and those that provide child care services. Have I missed anyone? I didn't say caterer, oh my gosh. All this food. Caterers, there is no party if there is no food. So the caterer, thank you so much. Anyone else? I apologize. Anyone else that I missed? All right, so we have pretty much cover the whole gamut of professionals that these couples have used or possibly have not used, and we'll find out why to both. I have shared with each of you on both sides of the table, keep your answers concise and your questions concise. Our 3 areas of focus will be finding and choosing vendors, working with the chosen vendors, and then recommendations for improving service. Now, I'd like to start the discussion with giving you some information or helping you to have information on the demographics and the psychographics of the panel. And the reason for that, of course, is to give you an idea of the lens through which they will give their perspectives. So the next couple of items are basically show of hands so that you'll see who we have seated at the table. So, age. I'd like to see a show of hands for those who are over 35. And I would imagine that leaves the remainder as under 35. Marriage. Is this your first marriage? If you show your hand. And if this is an encore marriage. And wedding professionals, you know that means this is not the first time. So if that's a term that's not familiar to you, it should be. The length of the planning cycle. And this is the time from which they seriously began to make wedding decisions. So, 6 months or less. 7 months to 1 year. More than 1 year. Thank you. The financier for the majority of the wedding expenses. Who paid for the party? All right, so the question would be, was it you, the actual couple? The parents? Any other source? Okay. And I'm certain, well, maybe I'm not certain, it'll come up as we talk a little bit more. There may be some blending that goes on in there as well, but this was the majority. The overall budget adherence. So with this question, I want to find out, within $100, did you meet the budget that you originally established for your wedding? Within $100. Let's see a show of hands. Did you exceed the budget that was initially established? And for those who came below the budget that was initially established. The next question has to do with decision-making processes. Did you involve yourself in a detailed research?
That's me.
Did you go on your gut instincts? And did you make the decision in consultation with a trusted source?
Both of us.
Okay. Your preferred method of communication. Now, I also suggested when I shared this question with them earlier that they not necessarily limit themselves to the wedding planning process in answering this question. But I think what you'll find is that one informs the other. So, face-to-face communication, is that your preferred method? Telephone. Raise them high so the people in the back can hear. See, thank you. Email. And text. Thank you. Now, the last in this series, do you watch bridal reality shows? Yes. Do you watch them?
Does one or two count? Yeah.
You gotta rephrase the question. Are we forced?
And those who do not watch reality or did not watch reality. Thank you. All right, so that, this begins to give us a foundation for, how their perspectives are put into, take them into consideration. So now, this also will be a couple of show of hands questions so we can move along. What was the best source to find wedding professionals? Print, online, bridal shows, referrals from family and friends, referrals from other vendors. Did social media play a role in finding your vendors? Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, blogs, Pinterest, chat boards. What is the number one vendor that you went to a bridal show to find? And what vendor would you not go to a bridal show to find? So the first part of that question, those who indicated that they did go to a bridal show, microphones are in front of you.
Chocolate fountain.
Talk right into your mic so that everybody can hear.
Chocolate fountain.
Honeymoon for us.
Yeah, the travel agent for the honeymoon.
Okay. What vendor would you not go to a bridal show to find?
DJ.
Those of you who did not go to a bridal show, who would you not go to a bridal show looking for?
Probably an event coordinator or an event location.
We didn't go to a bridal show because we raised our hands as the only ones who had 6 months or less, but really we only had 10 weeks and there were no bridal shows during our engagement.
Anyone else with a comment?
I'd say a DJ.
Can you all hear in the back?
A DJ.
We got a lot of cord here in the front, so feel free to pull these up close to you. Okay. All
I have
right.
one more thing. We didn't actually go to any bridal shows. I think we kind of needed to do things one step at a time and found those to be a little too overwhelming. So we were a little overwhelmed by them.
Ditto.
Okay. Magazines and publications. Which ones did you use to find vendors, if that was the source that you used? No one used a magazine?
The Knots magazine.
Okay.
The Bridal magazine, but I ended up not using any of the vendors from the magazine. So.
Did you all hear? Can you hear? Okay. Anyone else? Magazines, print publications, magazines that you use to find vendors?
We also used the Knot magazine. I think we looked at a couple of vendors from there.
All right, let's turn our attention to online searches. As you were seeking vendors using the internet, what keywords did you put into your search field?
Stationery and papers, both for the invitations and for the programs.
I used our home zip code. We were looking largely for very local vendors. We were concerned about that as a factor.
So you put the zip code itself into the search engine?
Yes.
Well, I mean, can we ask why on all of these questions? Because I feel like just knowing the answers doesn't really do much. I mean, why was it important to have someone who was super close by? What if they were an hour away? Why would that make a difference?
And I do have that question coming up. So we're going to keep moving. I have that question coming.
We also used it for, we were interested in pedophores, or our daughter was, rather than a wedding cake. And so I started with the term pedophore, and then it led me to a lot of vendors who served pedophores, and then I went with one that I actually knew, or a bakery that we actually were familiar with.
I only used 2 websites to plan my wedding. Wedding Wire was my primary source. I found the Knot to be a little bit too overwhelming when it came to searching for vendors. And then the second site that I used a lot was Etsy to look for favors and invitations and just small detailed items.
We used the Knot as our primary one, and then from there we kind of just went off of. It's not pulling. So we used the Knot first, and then from there is just recommendations from our reception site. Can you hear me? Yes? No?
Let's choose that one. When you get
We used. Can everyone hear me? Okay. We used Alexandria, Virginia, and weddings, and it would pull up different blogs, and I would look at the pictures. And if I liked the pictures, I would go to the vendors that were there and go to their particular websites. So that's what I did.
We also used the Wedding Wire pretty heavily as well.
I'm sorry.
We use the internet to find our venue, to look at pictures of flowers, to look at pictures from the photographers, and pictures of cakes.
Just to add on to that, for the wedding venue, the keyword specifically was wedding venue, and we typed in a couple county names or city names, so Frederick, Montgomery County, and then I think we were also looking at DC at one point as well, but wedding venue was the specific keyword we used.
Assuming that you, your friends, and family have never heard of any of our companies, how would you recommend that we introduce ourselves to you? That is, how do we get your attention? Give us a suggestion on how we get your attention. Can we start at, I'm going to hear from each couple on this one, so I'll start at the Josies, and each couple please respond.
first reaction is to say, oh, wow. I guess Wedding Wire is the first place I would look, just to see what recommendations there are on there, because we've been pleased with the vendors that we have found referred on Wedding Wire. But we didn't even know anything about Wedding Wire until our second son got married. And I should say, for the audience's sake, that we've been through 3 weddings in the last 13 months. Only one of which was a daughter, thank goodness. So the first one was a son, second one our daughter in May, and then the third one another son just last Saturday. And the experience of being involved in the son's wedding a year ago gave us some insight into some good vendors that we liked at that time, and then and some familiarity with Wedding Wire, and then that's how we got hooked into Wedding Wire and found some referrals to other people. And by the way, we did choose the same photographer for all 3 weddings, based on the experience that the bride's family had with the photographer for the first wedding, and I think it just grew from there. Anything you want to add, Sarah?
Well, I spent a lot of time, I know somebody talks about Etsy, however the heck you say that, the stationery one. I spent a lot of time on that one. But when you're looking for something, and as Bill said, you have no clue what you're looking for, I typed in something like wedding stationery, and I got back some hits that were so boring, or so we are the cheapest in town, rah rah rah, that I didn't want anything to do with it because it just sounded so fake, or they didn't work. And we'll talk about that later with something else. But I have no patience. I run on a real fast rate. I hate red lights, and I don't like wedding sites that don't work. So if you're doing something online and you want to get somebody's attention, first of all, make it attractive, but not overly rah-rah, and make sure that it works.
If we get to my websites working later, I have a lot to say about that one.
It depends on the vendor, but for the vendors that we did find online, I would say show up in search engines first, because if you're not at the top, you're not going to be seen.
We did all of ours online pretty much, and once we found the website, for us, it was really the pictures that you had posted on there, whether we liked those or not, as well as the reviews. If you didn't have you had to have a bunch of reviews, and they obviously had to be good. If you only had a few reviews, that was kind of a sign that we probably wouldn't use you or go forward with the interview. So the more reviews, the better for us.
That just made me think of something. As far as the online reviews go, I looked those up for our event location, and one thing that did increase my confidence in the venue is that there were not only positive reviews, but that there was a few people who actually did have complaints, but the vendor had responded to those in what I thought was a very reasonable manner. And then when I met them in person, I brought those up with them just to kind of correlate the story, and that meant a whole lot. It kind of seemed to add an air of legitimacy to the site, that they didn't just have a bunch of fake reviews going on.
I agree wholeheartedly with the last point that he just made. Considering that most of just going off of my personal family and friends, most people who are getting married now are in their 30s, maybe late 20s. And so you're dealing with a generation of people who rely on iPads and iPhones. So the more that you can make yourself aware using social media, as well as having a website, an interactive website, and the more information that you can put on the website, I think that helps. We were just having a discussion at dinner, and if anyone had a website and you didn't have your prices on there, I just automatically skipped and didn't even call because that's a time thing for me. And I mean, I was planning my wedding while working, so I literally planned my wedding using my iPhone. So if that's one less phone call that I have to make, that's something that was really important to me.
For us as well, it was pricing on websites because we tried to keep on a budget. And then another thing is just the information on the website, just overall, like pictures, and the availability of calling, that I could pretty much try calling you maybe after 5 and get a phone call or get a response. That was key for us too, because I mean, it only gives us a couple hours of a span to try to contact you guys, trying not to do it during work hours. So that was like another plus for us, is being more available after the 5 o'clock time frame.
I would add too that I guess we got lucky because the venue we held it at pretty much gave us all the recommendations for everybody. So we used every single one of their recommendations. So I guess if you're not a venue, maybe talk to other venue places to see if you can get recommended. And it worked out really well for us. And based off that, we recommended to our friends who are getting married the same people that our venue recommended.
This is going to sound really old school, but I think a good way to get my attention is through direct mail, just because I feel like we get blasted with a lot of emails, and sometimes I get tired of looking at websites. But if you have a really nice pamphlet or something that comes in the mail, then I open the mail, and I don't always open email. And I agree about prices being listed also. That's nice.
The way to get my attention is definitely through the internet and keeping an up-to-date website. I can't tell you how many websites I went through that looked so old and were really hard to navigate, and that really made me not want to utilize the services.
I wanted to ditto on the website not working and the prices online. If you weren't there, I just didn't want to deal with it. The thing I searched when I was looking is I looked in Google, but I looked in the pictures section, so I wouldn't see all the websites. I would just see how the pictures looked, and if the pictures looked good, I would go to that link.
A lot of my fellow panelists have already mentioned things that I was going to say, but just to reiterate some of the things, basically being flexible with your time, so after hours, so we don't have to call you during work hours. Social media, Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Pinterest, stuff like that people can follow and recommend. And trying to get on, so some of the common locations around the area, trying to get on their approved vendors list. So if we go there first and we ask who they recommend, we can go ahead and start checking you guys out and see if we like you or not.
All right, I think we're kind of on a similar train too. I think a lot of the ideas have been covered, but we definitely, we did a lot of web searching, and vendor referrals was huge for us too. We really didn't know where we were starting with any of this stuff. So if somebody we trusted could tell us who was a good person, we definitely went with those. And so anything you can do with partnerships, I think is helpful for us.
Yeah, certainly vendor referrals were a big deal. We don't know a lot of people getting married in the area, and I assume that a lot of people are in the DC area or from other places, and it helps to build contacts that way and have your venue say, I really like this caterer. Gives you a good starting place. And 100% agree on prices, but also in general the clarity of websites. If there's a lot of vague, congratulations on your special day type of comments, I don't know what to do with those. But if there's clear instructions for what you are offering, what to do, that helps out the process a lot.
Thank you. Now, some of you made comments with regard to websites. So let's talk about websites. What is the most important information that we as wedding professionals should consider as we design our websites? And I'd like to start on this end and work our way back so you don't have to be concerned that everybody answers your question first.
That's good. Accessibility, I would say. Just keeping things simple and organized for people who really don't go through this sort of thing very much.
I mean, I'm a little old school. I don't really worry too much about the appearance of the website so long as the information is there. So long as it's clearly spelled out, what it is you have to offer, and also the process for how to get started, what the best way to contact you is, and, how quickly we should expect a response. Just that sort of real simple clarity.
Going back to pricing on the websites, if you can have some sort of form calculator where you can put how many people is going to be at the event, and maybe, I don't know what goes into criteria when you come up with pricing, whether it's distance and number of heads going to be there, stuff like that. Another thing would be, since a lot of us use smartphones nowadays, if you could come up with, if your site's mobile, or if you have some centralized wedding application that you can be a part of. So if we go searching around there, we can read reviews and past experiences and that type of stuff. And that's about it for me.
For me, when I was looking at the website, I didn't want too much stuff there. Like if it was all cluttered, I couldn't deal with it. I just didn't go to continue with the website. If it had too little, then I felt like you didn't have enough information. How new are you? Also, if they didn't have a contact number, if contact us and it's an email or email and it goes directly to them, I didn't really like that either, because I would rather just call you guys and get to you on my time versus you guys getting back in your own time.
I was going to say multiple forms of contact on the site, because I don't want to call you. I want to email you.
Yeah, what he said, and prices.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing that they just said, but pictures. I like looking at pictures, and that's pretty much what I make all my decisions off of is pictures. Yeah, what she says too.
I echo what everyone else's opinion has been. The only thing I wanted to expound on is if your website does have Flash, just be wary of that, because the current iPad on the market doesn't allow you to view sites with Flash. So for me, a lot of times I'm curled up on my couch doing my web searching using my iPad. And if your website is Flash, I'm not going upstairs to get on my laptop to view your website. I'm just going to skip over to the next. And the other point I wanted to reiterate is the search engine. Someone brought that up before. When you're doing a search, I would say if your website isn't on the first page, it's not going to be found, because I'm not clicking to page 2, 3, and 4. 9 times out of 10, the service I'm looking for is on the first page.
I looked mostly at the pictures, but in particular pictures of real weddings. I don't want to see like models. I want to see actual people that look real, like it's really their wedding. And also I like a lot of them, a lot of variety of, winter weddings, fall weddings, spring weddings, and also direct links to reviews on the Knot and Wedding Wire. That was helpful.
For me, just wanted to reiterate the point of multiple forms of contact. Phone, if I want to get in touch with you immediately. Email, if I don't want to talk to someone right now.
I think pictures are worth more than 1,000 words. I'm going to look at those. I don't really want to have to read what's on there. I just like to see how it's going to look. And relating back to the last thing, what someone said is that in the search engine, sometimes they just click over to the pictures tab, and that's important for a lot of vendors, especially florists, because that's something you really have to be able to see.
If your website provides functionality that assists in invitations and keeping track of RSVPs, that's a great thing. I think it's a wonderful tool. As the father of the bride, the reception was my party, and I was very interested in doing the guest management function. And the Wedding Wire website had the ability for the groom who created his own wedding website to grant me an account that I could use to manage the RSVP function. However, I found that it really needs to work well, or we get frustrated. And I found cases where people RSVP'd across the room and they didn't show up in the database that I was looking at until the next day. That was frustrating. We had other guests whose names never turned up, and we had to follow up with them, and they said, well, we did RSVP, but it was never recorded in the database. The other thing about that kind of a website is that if guests don't remember the specific URL to get to Joe and Sally's wedding website and they've lost the invitation, they'd like to be able to go to whatever site it's hosted on and do a search on the bride or groom's name. And the search needs to be pretty obvious. On the one I'm thinking of, it was hard to find, and people would say to me, oh, I couldn't find it. So those are my 3 comments. Fourth one is that when someone RSVPs, theoretically, I, as the guest management guy, the father of the bride, could get an email separate from the one that goes to the bride or groom, telling me who's replied and whether their response was accept, decline, or not yet. And that function never worked. So I had to ask the groom to set up an automatic forwarding to me of every email that he got from Wedding Wire. No.
Panel, I'm going to, because of time, I'm going to skip the next question unless you feel that you need to answer it. I'm going to let you roll it into your next response and we'll go on. The next question has to do with sequencing. What we're trying to find out here, what is the sequence of vendors that are selected? Where are the priorities? So, by couple, and we'll start at the Josies and work our way back. By couple, please tell us who were the first 3 vendors that you contracted in order, and why was their product or service a priority? And then since I already have you, go ahead and answer the next question. Who was the last one that you contracted, and why did you wait to include them or decide that you needed their service?
For all 3, the location was the ultimate, because we had to know that it was particularly important for all 3 weddings that they be held in certain places. And so the dates were chosen because of the availability of the location. So I would say number 1 is the location for us. Number 2 for us was probably the caterer, to make sure we had food at all 3 of these locations. You know, with the Army-Navy Club, it was different, because if you get the Army-Navy Club, you get food. But for the others, you know, they needed to deal with us separately, particularly the one that was just this past weekend at Newton White. They had to have their caterer, and we were actually pretty heavily involved in this last wedding, too, so we know a lot of things that just happened. And our third one probably was maybe the musicians. But basically, a lot of it for all 3 weddings, we did a lot of it, and that's the way that was. Although I might say, I know for the first one this isn't true, but for our daughters and for the one that was just this weekend, our day of wedding coordinator, I would say would go up there right after even before the caterer. So, Tara, we got you early.
The consideration for that order, this doesn't seem to always work, but anyway, the consideration for that order was getting on someone's calendar, just making sure that someone that's providing a service every weekend has room for us.
And who was the last contracted?
Oh, we didn't answer that. Who was the last?
Maybe the stationer. Stationary.
Stationery. For all 3 weddings, I did a lot of the printing, so it was a matter of just going to Staples and buying the paper, but the wedding invitations themselves were purchased, so that was early on, choosing those.
The first vendor that we contracted was the venue because we needed to make sure they were available the date that we wanted and didn't really feel we were going to have a wedding unless we had a place to have it. The second one were the dresses, meaning my dress and my bridesmaids' dresses, and that was because my sister flew in from Colorado for Thanksgiving and said, I'm going to be with you when you buy your dress, so we're going shopping now. And I bought the first one I tried on because I didn't want to go shopping anymore, and I liked it. And hers and my mom took a lot longer, and so finally she found one that she liked, and I was fine with it. And the last one was the invitations. Again, because we were only engaged for 10 weeks, we needed to get the invitations sent out so we could get the RSVPs in so that we could plan, give the head count for the food and everything else. Oh, and the last vendor that we contracted was the photographer, and that was just because we couldn't find one that we wanted, that we liked, and then we finally found one, but that was stressful not having a photographer until the last minute.
For us, the first one that we contracted was the hotel because we needed to know where we were going to have it and whether or not everyone else after that has to be able to come to that location. So that was the primary one for us. Following that, it was the photographer because that was, for my wife, the very most important thing in the wedding. Obviously, pictures, that's how you're going to remember everything after that, so they better be, as she told the photographer, they better be perfect. And then...
I contacted the photographer before he proposed. I told her, I emailed her and said, will you photograph my wedding? I don't know when it is, he hasn't proposed, but your pictures are beautiful. And she was like, absolutely. So, yeah, that was number one.
And then the third one in that would be the invitations, making sure we could get the invitations out in time to everyone so that they could RSVP. And then the last vendor that we contracted was the makeup and hair.
Yeah.
So, do you want to add anything to that? That was you.
May I just get a point of clarification? When you said venue, you said something else that caused me to believe room block. Was that, you said where people needed to go, is that room block also?
Yeah.
Sleeping rooms in addition to the place where the ceremony or reception was taking place? Was that, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, I didn't know if I didn't hear.
I wouldn't say that was a primary. We were looking at hotels and we kind of assumed that there would be, they would be able to do a room block. I think when we said the venue was the most important, it was just because we needed to know where we were going to have it before we started contacting everyone else and contracting them to actually show up there.
Thank you.
Tony and I had a destination wedding, so for us it was a little bit different. The first vendor that we had to contact was a travel agent, and she played a large role in determining where we were going to have our wedding as well as what hotel. And then the second vendor I contacted was my wedding planner. I did not waste a lot of time contacting other vendors because the hotel was providing a handful of them, and then one of the main reasons why I had a wedding planner was to get my vendor recommendations from her. So I didn't want to spend a lot of my time researching. I just wanted to go to her and say, who do you use, and then research her top 3 and move on with it.
Sure. The first one we chose was our venue as well, because we needed to know where we wanted to have it. And then the second one we chose was our DJ, and he was recommended from our venue, and we chose him just because of his setup. It did not look like a traditional DJ set. It was pretty well covered, and that definitely grabbed our attention. And the third one that we contacted was the catering company, which was also recommended by our venue. And the last one that we contacted, and that's just because at this point, I already blew the budget, so I figured why not add something else. So we added Rita's Italian Ice as the last one, just because it went with our theme. Oh my God.
Right? The first thing that we chose was the venue, and then they also happened to be the caterer because that was the only choice. And we also used them for the cake. I think the second thing was the DJ, and the third thing was probably the save the dates. So stationery, we used a different stationery for invitations, but the third thing I think was the save the dates. And the very last thing that we added last minute was live music. We found a steel drum guy to play for like an hour, just for fun because it was inexpensive, and so we just added it on.
The first venue we made sure we got was a church because my family's very religious, and if I didn't get to church, I'd be in trouble. And then the next one was venue. The third one was our DJ. And the reason why I didn't look for a DJ in the bridal show earlier is because we already had a person who does all our family weddings, and he is amazing. And also I felt like you really can't get a feel of how a DJ works or any live music unless you actually are there in the bridal showcase, or have a way of hearing what they do. The last one that we did was the videography, just because of the cost. They're so expensive. And that's it.
All right, our first contract was also the venue. We got married over Memorial Day weekend, which we knew was really popular, so we wanted to get that booked pretty early on. The second one we did was our officiant. Figured couldn't really have a wedding without someone to marry us. And then the third one was our photographer. And I think the final thing that we did was live music. We had a string trio, and we kind of had a chain of, just personal contacts to get that going. So I think that was our final thing.
All right, thank you. Okay, now, is there anyone who would do anything differently? What would you do differently?
Not procrastinate.
I think I would have just worried less. Everything went very well, but I just didn't know what I was doing, so I worried pretty much about everything.
I would have eloped.
Are you just asking if we would have done things differently in the sequence or with specific vendors?
In the sequence.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Now, this is going to be a show of hands if you think this is a priority in the choosing of your vendors. Prior knowledge of the vendor or the brand. Credentials, education, training, affiliations. Physical distance from you. That, I think, addresses the question that someone had about the zip codes. Availability, by phone, by email, in person. Their website, was it attractive, up to date? Was it complete enough for you? Was it easy to use? Easy to find information about pricing. Before contacting them, did you need to know their starting prices? Did you need to know their full range of prices? Online reviews from other couples. Thank you. This one is to the men. What services did you find that addressed your unique needs as the groom-to-be?
Mostly vendors who are responsive, and I said earlier I like emails and people who got back pretty quickly and with detailed answers. That was amazingly helpful. And I also liked being included in things. I don't have a whole lot of strong opinions, but I don't like the strange dynamic of, this is her day, you go sit in a corner kind of a thing.
pretty much the same thing.
I don't know exactly what my needs were during this whole process. I kind of tried to stay as agreeable as possible with things. And I also didn't really plan a lot of it. She did most of it. So, I took what I got in that regard. So.
Well, the only thing I really cared about was the bar and what we were serving. But for me, the DJ actually was the funnest part of planning it, because our DJ is really cool. Like, he understood what type of music we'd want to play and everything. We basically said we wanted like a party. We didn't want any of the Macarena and all that, and he understood that. And so we threw out a bunch of names of like bands or people basically that we wanted him to play, and he knew who they all were, and he had it on his phone, so he'd even play it. So we'd throw out an artist's name, and he'd say, okay, what about this song, this song, this song? He asked what clubs and bars we go to get an idea of what we listen to, because he actually used to DJ at a club, so we just got along with him really well. I think basically he's just really cool DJ. It was really informal conversation. We pretty much just joked around most of the time. I think the only thing that really irritated me, that for me, I guess, as the groom, who I kind of felt like I was paying for most of it, was people not like returning phone calls or saying that they'd give us a quote and they just never did, which I thought was odd because we're willing to pay, but they just didn't contact us. So for me, that's what irritated me the most, and probably is the most irritating part of it. So I guess as a groom, you don't want to get me too mad. That's it.
For me, my number one goal was to make sure that this process was as streamlined as possible for my wife. The least stressed she is, that means the least stressed I will be. A lot of the things, when I first started, I told her I want, for one, be able to choose what I can wear. 2, have input on the DJ, and 3, have an open bar. She can make a decision on anything else. And so I just said, with regards to us picking certain vendors and making sure we had a wedding planner, a lot of people were saying you don't need that. I said we do, because at the end of the day, the last thing we wanted to do was start arguing, and all because she's stressed, overwhelmed, and I'm looking at her like, well, what can I do? And so I'd say for me, those are my top 3 things.
I would probably second what he just said about making sure my wife is happy. If she's happy, I'm happy. Happy wife, happy life, right?
Ditto.
And second, I guess, for me was just the flexibility that they showed, especially when meeting us in person. My wife was the one who did a lot of the initial reaching out and doing the contacting. But to actually, before we hired anyone, we made sure we met with them in person, so that people were flexible around my work schedule. If sometimes I had to show up to the appointment a little late, they didn't mind kind of restating some of the things that were already mentioned, with my wife while I was there, to make sure I was caught up to speed, and I felt like I was part of the actual process and not just there. So I would say just being flexible with when you can meet and where you can meet them.
I would strongly second pretty much everything he just said, as far as making sure that the grooms feel like that they're included and actually an important part of the process, even though my wife did most of the initial outreach and might have had a lot of the initial conversations, still being willing to recap, just showing, kind of respect for, helping the grooms understand what's going on, and then also being able to handle small personalizations. I had a couple of requests for the event and the photographer, for the venue and the photographer, and just knowing that they would be able to accommodate those, and not, so basically asking if the groom had any special request, and not just assuming that he's going to go right out there and say it, but being willing to draw him out about what needs he might have.
When the microphone started down the other end of the table for this question, I thought I would have nothing to say, but I've discovered now that there are a couple of young men to my right that have an awful lot of wisdom. I would second one of the comments that said, just regardless of the communication channel being used, responsiveness from potential vendors is really important. When somebody asks you a question, whether it's by email or telephone or whatever, Twitter, whatever, then just getting back to that person in a reasonable amount of time is very important. And if it can't be a direct conversation, then at least let them know what to expect, when to expect an answer back.
Now, gentlemen,
I'm not a groom, but I'm a mother of 3 grooms, and I have to give a shout out to Men's Warehouse because they have this nationwide thing where we've had groomsmen all over the country having to come to Washington for a wedding with the proper clothes. And because Men's Warehouse, and there must be other places that do it too, but they've just been wonderful to all of our sons. You can get measured in Seattle, you can get measured in Raleigh, you can get measured in who knows where, and come here and go to White Flint or someplace and pick it up. And it was so easy because all the guys that we've dealt with over this past year believe shopping, and ladies, you probably agree, you go to the store to buy, you do not shop. So they loved it. They could walk into Men's Warehouse, walk out with it, and they had their tuxes, and life was wonderful. So I really think that's important, is ease also for guys as a mother.
Thank you. Now, you all have shared a lot of what impressed you and some of what turned you off in the process of the responses you've given thus far. Are there any other things that you'd like to add as far as what impressed you most when you met with a vendor, or what was really a turn off? If anybody has anything to add there.
Well, what was a turnoff for me is when I would get a response to an email or have a face-to-face interaction or have something happen the day of my wedding that showed that the vendor did not either read my email or listen to what I had said in a meeting. And that resulted in things not going the way that they should have. So, I work in services. You have to treat every client like they're your only one, and take the time to read their email, make sure you understand it, and make sure you do what you've said you're going to do.
Sorry. Go ahead. I would add one thing that really impressed me. Our caterer, both at our walkthrough and at our first tasting, told us a lot of stories about other weddings he'd done. I really think that helped us kind of envision the day and just kind of make it more real for us, because this was, as we've said, really new to both of us. And, so hearing, oh yeah, we did this for that person, and really just kind of sharing personal stories helped a lot.
Well, I don't know how many vendors do this, but my florist, the DJ, and what was the other person? There was someone else. They met me at the venue, and the photographer. We all met at the venue, and that was really important, because with the photographer, I could walk around with her, and she'd be like, "Oh, this is kind of cool. Oh, this is a nice shot. Oh, I've worked here before." My florist, she brought me a bouquet with my wedding colors, which was really nice. And I liked it so much, I asked her to recreate it the day of my wedding. And the DJ, he actually went up to the room where the reception was going to be, and he was like, "This is a perfect place for lighting. He helped kind of give me an idea of how the room could be set up. So that was really, really helpful. I would recommend that if you can, go meet with your, potential client at the venue. You have more ideas than we do. Usually our first time.
I would say, if as a vendor, if you can be as simple as easy to work with as possible. It's a very stressful time for both parties involved, and it just seemed for us, those who were easy to work with, who didn't make things difficult in terms of getting things done, communicating, and things of that nature, was a pleasure to work with, as opposed to the communication breakdowns, almost having to ask as opposed to being more proactive. We had situations with our before we made the decision to change our wedding planner. We had to ask her, well, have you done this? Have you done that? And she was almost saying, well, that time is not the time. And for us, it was stressful because we had to make decisions. And we didn't feel that she was as proactive. And it ended up burning us later on because some things that we've been able to make the decision on, we weren't able to make it. And then it cost us more down the road.
On another note, the two vendors that I come to mind when I think about the positive was when we met with our stationery person, and I love stationery, so that was something that I did want to invest money in. The ladies that we ended up going with, I met with them at a Starbucks, and the first thing that they did was congratulate me, but then they just kind of interviewed me about how Tony and I met, a little bit about our engagement. And I told her a little bit about our destination wedding, and when I met with her the second time, she had already designed my save the date just based off of the little things that I had told her. So I didn't have to go to her with this grandiose design in place. She just was able to say, hey, I listened to you, here's your story, so I thought this would be appropriate. And so it was the actual invitation person that came up with the entire mantra or theme for our wedding. We didn't do it at all. As far as my wedding planner, what I was most impressed with her was when I met with her for the first time, she interviewed me rather than me interviewing her. And so just because she was asking so many questions, that made me feel like, wow, she really is interested in what I'm doing. She's gathering a lot of details, which made me feel like her work was going to be more credible.
For us, in the beginning, it was stressful until we found our venue, and then everything was pretty much smooth sailing. And I would say it actually hit me bad the month or two before the wedding itself. And we had an awesome wedding planner who helped make our day phenomenal. The day of, I would say, a week or two, our entire party got an email of where they needed to be, where they needed to go for rehearsal dinner, the day of the wedding. Like, she made known that she was the POC. And then the one thing I will never forget was on my wedding day, two of my bridesmaids were still not at my parents' house where I was supposed to be. And I think I got a call at 10:30, I want to say, and it was our wedding planner. She was just making sure everything was fine. And I tell you not, just the sound of her voice and just hearing her just making sure things were okay made me no longer worry that my bridesmaids weren't there, because the day before she said, the only people that we need at the wedding is you and Adam, nobody else. So just remembering that it helped me kind of mellow down and no longer become stressed out. So that's one of the biggest things that we take back from the whole process too.
And then I would just add too, I guess what impressed me the most was every vendor that we picked was just really nice to us, to the point where, like, you're Facebook friends with some of them, and you go and visit our florist to see his dog. 2 weeks ago. It's kind of weird because you think every vendor would be nice to you, but we've had, I think, 2 or 3 vendors that were actually really rude. One was mad that we showed up half an hour early. And we live in Springfield, and we had to drive to DC on a weekday at like 6 o'clock. So not knowing what traffic is like and having to take 395, we of course left early, and we got there early. It was really awkward. The whole entire like hour and a half there was just like, I don't want to do this. Like, this is not going to work out. But yeah, every vendor we picked was extremely nice. Like, minus the 3, but. And then back to kind of what I said with our the venue that we picked. I think what also, like I mentioned, that they recommended everybody to us, all of our other vendors, but they actually had examples, like pictures, like the photographers. They had pictures at their place, obviously, but they had pictures of what the photographers were doing. So when we picked our photographer, we actually sat our photographer down and showed him, hey, these are books of other photographers that have taken photos here, and this is what they did. and obviously like the cakes and whatnot, they had examples of that. So me, once again, being a picture person, that helped us out a lot, because by the time we met with our venue, which is the first thing that we picked on like the second day of planning, by the third day of planning, we already had pretty much everybody booked, or at least talked to them.
I was really impressed by how eager to please us our venue and caterer were. It seemed like everything that we asked them if they could do, they said yes, even when we just assumed they would say no for some reason. And even stuff that they weren't really supposed to say yes to, like, can we set off fireworks here? They would just turn a blind eye. So they were definitely yes people, and I liked that a lot. It made it really go well. But the thing I didn't like was they were also really, really unresponsive. So I only maybe tried to contact them like 3 different times during this whole process, and they were not available. And they're lucky that it was me, and I didn't care, because I feel like any normal person would have had a fit if they couldn't get a hold of their venue. So that wasn't good. But good.
I would say the 2 things are, responsiveness. Like a lot of other people said, you don't have to sit by your bedside with a phone, but there were some people we initially contacted who really didn't make sort of the minimum effort to either get back to us or let us know what certain details were when we were talking. And also really try to present a wide array of options. I don't think we knew exactly what we were looking for, but our caterer suggested ice cream sundaes, and we were immediately taken with the idea, which we would never have considered. And, our photographer suggested a lot of different packages, and we found something that hit. Try to explore different things you can offer.
One thing we found was a bit of a turnoff to our daughter interviewed DJs herself, because that was sort of out of our preview. And she and her future husband called several of them. And think about how whatever you are saying to your client, how it comes across. Because she talked to a couple, and they're like, yeah, well, we could, yeah, maybe. Well, we could probably do that. Yeah, maybe. And she's like, no, I don't want. And these were recommended DJs that had come to her. And she's just like, they didn't make themselves clear. They weren't intelligible. I don't want to deal with them. I'm worried they're going to talk like that on my wedding day. And another one said, oh, well, yeah, we got to make some comments, as you come in, and you got to do this and you got to do that. And she goes, nope, I already said that's not what we want. It needs to be low key. And so kind of particularly listen to yourself on the phone when you're talking to someone, particularly for the first time, because first impressions go a long ways. And that really was a turnoff for her with some of the DJs that she interviewed. Sorry, DJs.
Well, that's a great segue into working with the chosen vendors. You all have given some introduction to the experiences that you've had and identified those specific vendors. So let's dig a little deeper into understanding the experience. And let's start with wedding planners. First of all, just by a show of hands, how many used a full service wedding planner? A day of wedding coordinator? Any other partial services in planning? How many of you did your planning yourself? How much planning, how many of you there was a comment made previously about the use of mobile devices, smartphones, iPads, ... How many of you used any of those in the planning process? Okay. The use of the wedding planner, or not using the wedding planner, whatever the case may have been, what would you do differently? To use or not to use?
Use
that
her
is
more.
The question.
Use her more. Use her more.
I agree with her too.
I will say, I don't think I fully understood what a wedding planner did. So, we didn't end up using one. But I think, I can definitely see see the appeal now, that I'm at the other end of it and kind of realize what the services are. But anything I guess you can do to present what those services are a little more clearly to people like me would probably be helpful.
I would second that. I found our wedding planner very helpful in recommending vendors, and I didn't even realize that was something that they would do. But when they recommended a couple options, I immediately went with them. So if you're a wedding planner, definitely mention that you can do that. And if you're not a wedding planner, talk to a wedding planner about being one of their approved vendors.
The other thing I would add is a lot of brides don't see the value of using a planner. And I don't know if you all use this verbiage on your website or not, but for me, my goal was to be a guest at my own wedding. And the only way that you can be a guest at your wedding is to have a planner. And so I don't know if that's verbiage or if that's a way that you market your business, but for me, that was key. I had no desire whatsoever to plan my own wedding. I wanted to enjoy my wedding. And that was what my planner allowed me to do. And my husband, as he said, we did not blink an eye about the money that we paid her. It was money that I would spend over and over again.
Let's go on to the venue. There's been a lot of discussion on venue, and you all identified venue as a high priority on your list. How many, let's see, the number of venues that you visited prior to making your decision, anybody visit more than 5?
Online or in person?
Good question. You answer. Go ahead and respond.
I don't really remember how many I looked at online. I clicked through a few. I called the one that we ended up having our wedding at when they said they had the date available. I had already decided this 3 days after we got engaged, and it was just a matter of convincing him that's where the wedding was going to be.
How did you find your chosen venue? Was it in person or online? So in person. How many found it by physically going there? And how many online made the decision by looking at it online? So now the question becomes, why did you make the choice of venue? And we'll start at the far end and work our way.
Well, in our case, it was the groom's family church, and there was never any discussion about it being anywhere else. And he was a member of the Army-Navy Club, so the reception right around the corner from the church, that was also a given.
We chose our venue because it was available on the date that we wanted to get married. The pricing was less than anywhere else that we looked at, and they did a lot. Linen, centerpieces, table numbers, day of coordinator, food, drinks. It just took a lot off my plate that I didn't have to think about, that I didn't have time to think about. Oh, and they said they could accommodate the number of guests that we wanted, but I would beg to differ.
We had a bunch of people coming in from out of town, so for us, the hotel was ideal place for us. Also, we wanted to do both the reception and the ceremony in the same place, so the place that we picked had to be able to accommodate both those. And we wanted to see it in person. Pictures can look great, but it also can be deceiving sometimes if you just see the pictures on the internet. So we wanted to make sure we could see it in person and also interact with the employees there to make sure that if they treated us well there, hopefully they were going to treat us well during the ceremony.
I would say for us going and doing a destination wedding, it was for us very important to actually see it in person. So my wife and my mom and her mom went down and took a tour. They got 5 or 6 different venues that were recommended by our travel agent, and they toured them. They stayed in one place and were able to actually get tours throughout the whole venue, to where you can actually see, where the wedding would be held. A lot of the websites, they make it look wonderful, but when you get there, one of the locations that we liked, the beach was awful, and if we had have chosen it from how the website looked, she wouldn't have been happy. So I think that if you can somehow build it in to like your budget and say, okay, hey, we'll take a trip, call it a mini vacation, stay at one location that may be the cheapest, and then go and tour around to see which hotels you really like. Get a chance to meet the on-site coordinator there, because I think that there's a lot of hidden things and unexpected things that occur when you're there that you can probably uncover by just going and visiting the location.
For us, it was a weird time. My husband was on a weird rotational schedule. So I remember being on the phone with my mother-in-law, and I was just searching the Knot, and I ran across Harborview. And they were pretty much close from home. So I remember I called up, and I'd asked when we could get an appointment, and it was a surprise that we can get in that day at 8 o'clock because that's the time he was coming home. So the fact that I can call a place and then get in that very exact same day was a big plus for us. So we went in, took the tour, which was phenomenal. Pictures do not do justice. And we pretty much on the spot decided that this is where we wanted to hold our reception. And they even allowed us to bring his parents a couple of months afterwards, and we possibly hold a date. So it was just the fact that it was an ideal location. Like, I've never dreamed of a place like this. So it was a big plus, not only to get on time and then just to view. So, and then the staff is phenomenal. They definitely helped us out from the very beginning. We were super stressed out. And then when we got there, it was all this information. They're like, well, these are the vendors that you can choose from. Here are our preferred vendors. So we literally took that list and ran with it. And I think we actually chose 6 vendors from the list, I want to say. So it just made the entire planning process so much easier.
We had only one lead on a place, so we went to Ocean City to take a look at it, and we liked it, but I think if it hadn't panned out, that one place, we'd probably just still be engaged, because I don't think either of us knew where to look beyond that or what to do, or really felt like doing it either. So luckily that place worked.
I knew the moment I stepped into St. Raymond's Catholic Church, that was a church I wanted to get married in. So even before we got engaged, I knew where we wanted to get married. We went to the Mason Inn because that's where we went to school. And then we also chose that because of, the catering that was there, all the day of coordinator, everything was, there. We didn't have to plan a lot of things.
We were really looking for a reception space that had a little bit of character, so we looked at a few different historic house museums in Alexandria, and the one we picked, we really went with, I think largely, was the staff. We just loved them. They were really flexible. They were really welcoming. It was also in a great location. We had a lot of people in from out of town, so we wanted to make sure that it was really easy to get to by public transportation and pretty accessible to folks. So, you want to add anything?
Yeah.
Moving on to florals, and I'm going to kind of speed it up a little bit as the hour is getting late. How many of you were aware that you could have your wedding flowers preserved? Just a show of hands. Did those of you who were aware of it, did you use that service? Those of you who were not aware and now know that it could be done, is that an option that you would consider? Had you known? Anyone yes? Okay. Entertainment. How many used live music? A DJ. Did anyone consider any other form of entertainment as part of your reception? Would you like to share with us what?
I have a big family, so we do our own. It's called Nomadic Glee Club. So every wedding we've done, I think 3 now. We do a performance. I used to belong to PACAS, which is Filipino American Culture Art Society, and a couple of my cousins played the violin, cello, and had a couple singers. So nobody left before 11.
Children. How many of you had children as part of your guest list? How many made special accommodations for the children who were in attendance? Share with us what you did and why.
We just had a quiet room. We had a teenager that could babysit if it was wanted, but we mostly had a couple nursing mothers, and they just went off to the quiet room, and then others just took their kids inside. But we had a separate room way away from everything else for that wedding.
We just had like children's meals available for them so that they wouldn't have to eat the stuff they probably wouldn't like.
You said meals?
Yeah, children's meals.
I had coloring books.
I had a little gift bag for those that were under 4, and in there were like little toys that they could play around with that didn't make too much noise, so it wouldn't be a distraction.
Okay, thank you. Photography. What did you primarily base your decision on when selecting a photographer?
I would say, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
For us, it was easy. We saw a photographer at the first of our 3 weddings that we really liked, and we went with them for the second and the third.
We chose our photographer based on style and price. I didn't care about the photographer. I would have been fine not having one, and my mom would not have allowed that, so.
And as far as the type of style, we weren't really into the whole photojournalism type style, which seemed to be pretty popular.
Okay.
The pictures. I mean, they're blogs. I think blogs are really important for photographers. They have to have them. Also Facebook, because then they tag people on Facebook, then you can go and look at those people's actual Facebook page and see if they look better. You know, like, you want to look your best. So if the photographer makes you look like a supermodel and you really don't look like that on your regular Facebook pages, then that's the one.
Just one thing I know with our photographer that kind of annoyed me a little bit, but was that as part of the contract, when we agreed to sign her, we had to pay for her to have like a regular meal and sit at the table, and I didn't really agree with that. I felt like we were paying for her to be there and work, not really chat with our friends and enjoy the meal. So that was just a little something that annoyed me a little bit.
I understand.
Okay, videography. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll just go. For us, those our photographers are on Facebook, but based on that, we were able to see a lot of the photos. But I think we made our decision not even based on wedding photos that we were looking at. He was just really creative with his photos, so he did a lot of different neat things that I thought were really cool, just like different like action scene type photos, which made us like pretty much realize like he's really creative. He's gonna have some good ideas for the wedding. So I don't think we even saw wedding photos. We may have, but I didn't really pay attention to those. And then, obviously price too. He was good price. But then, he had a photo booth, but it wasn't like an actual booth. Like he decided to do his own like photo booth, like just up against the wall. And he had his second photographer pretty much doing like having props and stuff like that, which we thought were cool. And then at the wedding, which we didn't know about until the wedding, but he had a laptop right there, so you'd take a photo of everybody, and then you'd see the photo right there. So a lot of people, if they blinked or whatever, they would just do another photo. But pretty much everybody at our wedding loved that.
I would say that for us, less was sometimes more with photography. We were looking for something reasonably priced, but also to get something that was relatively unobtrusive and not all that frilly. We we did see websites where people would say, you know, I'll stay the whole day and I have a package where I'll take 800 pictures of you. And that didn't actually sound like a positive for us. We didn't want to sit through anything like that for the entire day. So
to add on I just kind of tagging out, the photographer we worked with, you know, we told him what we wanted. We didn't want like prep photos or really anything. And so he actually made a smaller package just for us with just 4 hours of photography, and we loved that.
How many of you used a videographer? A professional videographer? What were the benefits of using a professional?
I guess to have it recorded, but I still haven't picked my music yet for my video, so I don't know.
For those of you who did not use videography, does anyone want to share why that vendor was not important to you? Can I just get okay, I see two to grab the mic, so the two of you, please.
We didn't elect to use a videographer just because my thought was we would watch the video one time when we got home and then we would never look at it again. So I thought that for the moment it sounded great, but down the line I'd regret spending the money.
We didn't use a professional videographer because at my job I work with a lot with video cameras. So I just picked a friend of mine and gave him a camera and said, here you go, film it. And he came with a GoPro too, so that was a lot of fun. So we just kind of did it ourselves.
Okay, thank you. Stationery. How many used a storefront to secure your stationery items? Save the date, invitations, menu cards, escort cards, etc. Anybody go to a storefront to do that?
For the invitations, we did.
For the invitations?
Invitations only. We did the rest ourselves.
How many went online, ordered any of your stationery items online? How many of you did them yourselves? I saw someone reaching for the mic.
Yes.
Is there a comment?
We didn't do save the dates because we didn't have time. We ordered our invitations on staples.com, Kinko's. Yeah, it doesn't even really matter. We did not have menu cards because our guests chose what they wanted when they RSVP'd. I got the programs at Staples and the tent cards also and printed them myself.
Did anyone, moving on to your officiant or celebrant, did anyone use an officiant who is not the pastor or clergy at your church? In making the selection on your officiant, did you have a preference to male or female? Or did it matter? Ethnicity? Let's move on to the honeymoon. How many planned their own honeymoon themselves, or do it yourself? And how many used a travel agent? How soon after the wedding did you go on your honeymoon? That's the frame for this question. So, did you go immediately after the wedding? A month later? Not yet. Okay. Design and decor. How many of you use specialty linens, chair covers, pipe and drape, those types of items to add ambiance to the setting? For those of you who did, was that a part of your initial budget consideration? Though the others who did and it wasn't a part of your initial, was it influenced by comments made by any one of your vendors that you had secured? Yes? Okay. Confections and sweets. Aside from the wedding cake, did anyone have any other sweets as part of their wedding experience? Okay, and I see that there's a comment.
Well, our daughter was in a rather rebellious mood at that point in the decision-making process, and she didn't want anything that had been done before, so no cake. So we scurried around and thought about petit fours, which my wife already mentioned. We ended up getting a very nice assortment of petit fours from a local bakery in Rockville, and it was far cheaper than anything else I could have imagined.
We had a cake in addition to our other sweets because some relatives wanted us to have a cake cutting ceremony, and it's kind of nice to save the top layer for a year, and it looked really pretty. My cousin owns a bakery and she made it for us, but we had Georgetown cupcakes.
We had a cookie table because I'm from Pennsylvania, and that's what they do in addition to cake.
Yeah, we also had a cookie table, then we did Italian ice too.
We had the chocolate fountain.
All right, let's talk about catering. How many used an independent caterer? And I mean someone who was not directly affiliated with the venue. Like if you were at a hotel and the hotel provides catering, how many used an independent caterer to provide their services, their food service? Okay. Now, for the two couples that answered that question, did you feel that you got a good value for the food service that you received? And what made it a good value, if so?
Well, I would say we loved our caterers. We had Rockland's barbecue catering it, and I think they were so professional. They really kind of had the whole thing running very smoothly with all their staff, and it was a great value.
We thought it was a good value too. We had pretty much our biggest thing besides the bar and the DJ was making sure that the food was amazing. We had an Italian themed wedding, so to make sure that the lasagna was exactly how it was supposed to taste to somebody's standards was phenomenal. So we had no complaints whatsoever about the food. So, and definitely they helped decorate really nicely. So we were pleased the day of the wedding.
Did you have any do-it-yourself wait a minute. Did you try anything do-it-yourself before realizing that a professional was worth the price? And if so, which do-it-yourself item was that?
I guess we started, my original budget. I decided I could try to do some things by myself until it got a little bit overwhelming. Like, for example, the florist. I had this vision, like I knew what I wanted it to look like. So I had purchased like these really fancy mirrors. I had purchased like the vase I was gonna go on top and like the beads and everything. So the only thing is I thought I would probably do the flowers myself, and come to find out that I knew that the day of the wedding, that's the last thing I wanted to do. So that definitely wasn't gonna work out. There were a couple of things here and there that I thought that I could do it myself, like possibly invitations to save money. No, that did not go well. So we hired a professional that was their job. And it actually turned out better than we imagined. And then I know our wedding planner had a couple of suggestions, and I had originally thought about them, but then once she knew that she could do them, I said, great, I don't have to do them now. So it was good. No, we started it that way, and it definitely did not end up. It's good that it didn't, because I probably would have messed it up.
I did the name cards by couple, and so putting them in order was a little hectic, trying to find the last names, and the two names weren't, they weren't married, or just they didn't take the last name, and so just putting the name cards in order was a little bit hectic. And then I wanted to put down what they had for what they chose, so either chicken or fish or some other meat. And later I found out that we categorized it wrong. So people were getting fish and they actually wanted chicken. So, and I didn't find out until after the wedding, so that was good. But
to add on to what was said before, I can't think of specific things that we wish we'd done ourselves. Maybe a little bit with day of planners, but in a general sense, people really don't I think, realize how pressured not just the day is, but the entire week before. And that's something that I would really go back and say, this is, a lot comes up that you don't anticipate, and people aren't going to know, they're not going to anticipate.
I wouldn't recommend that any bride take on a project just because it is more time consuming than what you think. And I used Etsy and we ordered fans, and the time that I would have spent doing something myself, I ended up having to invest that time in retying the bows because I didn't like the way that the Etsy vendor tied the bow on the fan. Then it was like, oh, we like these bags, but we need to add this to the bag. So we didn't go into the wedding saying we're going to do this project ourselves. Everything we paid for, but there were still things that we had to go back and redo to make it look like the picture or something like that. So I just was very much a let's pay everybody to do everything. I didn't want to do anything. So
Before we get closing comments from the panel, are there any burning questions, any subject matter that has not been addressed, any vendor whose area has not been touched? Any questions from the audience?
I'm just curious, when you go to your vendors to look for, most of you said it was the first stage, are you impressed by gifts? If they give you a gift?
I would have been, I think, if they had. Yeah.
I was, but my wife is saying she wasn't, but it made an impression for me.
I was. I liked the bouquet, like I said earlier, from my florist. And also when we went to go meet with the hotel that we booked at, the hotel coordinator gave us a bottle of champagne, which was nice. So it's always nice to get a gift, so it doesn't hurt.
I specialize in ceremony music, violin, cello, harp, string quartets, string trios. For those of you who are married in a church where maybe you didn't want organ, were any of you ever aware of any agency you can go to book ceremony musicians and not just deal with that venue's salary organist? Or why would you not choose a harp, violin, cello, something different? Help me with that.
We definitely did not want the organ. We actually didn't want any music because we didn't want the organ option. And we did, through a friend who got married and did the harp, I think he had a harpist. Yeah. We started searching online, and we did the combination of a harpist and a violinist for our ceremony. And our church was okay with using them and not doing the organ. So it took a little bit of searching, though. It really wasn't that easy to find, so I left that to him to do. And I think
some of the people we found, because I think we contacted maybe like 2 people before we found the actual person we went with. I think they were kind of doing it as a side, because I think they worked for the Capitol Harpist, so they think they did it just as like a side job, I guess. So I think just the day that we requested, they were busy. But I think we went through 3. On the third one, we found somebody that was free. It worked out really well. I'm glad we did it.
We used a string trio also, and we did have a little trouble finding one, so we kind of went through a chain of friends to get someone. So, I think any services that were available would have been helpful to find ceremony music. We loved having the string trio. That was great.
I'm going to take one. Let's see. Oh.
I don't think I was aware that there was ceremony music, but I will say one of the mistakes that I made was in the DJ that we went with. He came on recommendation from a family member as having done office holiday parties and was basically free. But hearing all the other couples, how much importance they placed on the DJ, I would have done that. He was one of the ones that I mentioned that I sent emails with YouTube links to songs to tell him exactly what I wanted, what minute and second I wanted it to start. And I wanted a regal version of Mendelssohn's Wedding March for walking in, and he played Here Comes the Bride. And I wanted to stop and say, you're playing the wrong song, but I didn't want to be that person. So it's something I will never forget, is that the DJ played the wrong song when I walked down the aisle.
Okay, I see a couple of hands, and my request, because the hour is so late, it's 10 minutes to 9, if you would pose your question so that they can respond with a show of hands or a yes or no. Is that possible? Susan.
In the past, we've been told by, you told us which vendors you contracted with first. In the past, we've been told from couples that when they first started looking, there was an initial shock, and it took some time before they actually contracted with their first vendors. By a show of hands, from the time, and we understand you got married in 10 weeks, so condense yours, but from the time that you did get engaged, were you able within 6 weeks to start contracting? Were you able to do enough research so that you can start contracting with a show of hands within 6 weeks from getting engaged? Wow.
Thank you.
Well, mine is not a yes or no question, so.
Do your best.
But
show of hands.
Well, I mean, for those that didn't use videography, is there something that could have persuaded you to use a videographer for your wedding? I mean, I guess you can just say yes or no, raise your hands. Cost.
Price, yeah.
Cost, price.
Or why? And if it was in like combination with the DJ, because most people are going to have some sort of music at their wedding. So if the videographer is like a part of the package and it's an additional cost that's built in, I probably would have gone for it in that case.
And someone else said that they were concerned that they weren't going to watch it more than one time. So if you could convince someone you'll watch this every anniversary or something, maybe they would be more likely to buy it.
Probably another reason there didn't seem to be much interest in that was that I don't think the question was ever asked, how many of us used non-professional videographers? And in 2 of our weddings, we did use friends to do that function.
Okay, so back to the price thing very quickly. I know a lot of you guys said it was very important. If it was the best website ever, but it did not have pricing on it, would you fill out the contact box to see what the pricing was?
No.
Hands that you would.
Let me make sure I'm clear on the question. If there's no pricing, will you use the service? Was that the question?
Or is the starting price enough? Like, do you want to see everything, or just like a starting pricing? No, that's within your budget. Is that good enough? Show of hands. Show of hands.
For me, I want to see the price because the price is going to let me know whether or not it's in my budget. And as I mentioned to you before, when you're busy and you're working and you're planning a wedding, the last thing I want to do is have to call to find out what your price is when every other vendor has their price right on the website, and I can make a decision right there of whether it's in my budget or not.
But the starting price, is that good enough though?
If your website is that great, I mean, the thing you have to keep in mind is that, when you're planning a wedding, you're going through several sites. So at that point, it's, well, this person over here has their whole list of prices, this person has their list, and this person has their list. Why would I go over here and make an unnecessary phone call when I have all the necessary information over here? Because, I don't know, for me, time is money. So
I think the only one I would make an exception to is the florist, just because it's how elaborate and creative you want it to get to it. But I think for like the makeup, the DJ, like those should be somewhat standard. But florist, I think, would be my only exception.
I recognize that prices are variable, certainly, and for me, it's as much about clarity as price. It's maybe everyone feels differently, but if you have a website that says, please contact us, we'd love to talk to you, that would be different. But if it's just sort of a lot of ambiguous details, then that just confused me, and if I was confused, I'd be more likely to retreat and, say I'll handle this next month. So.
And lastly, my assumption if the price isn't there is that you're too expensive anyway. Yeah. Like my assumption is you have something to hide, and so I'm like, oh, well, they're probably out of my price range.
Next question by show of hands. How many of you use custom-made invitation, like custom from scratch? And maybe a couple of you don't like to say what led you to that decision.
I appreciate stationery. I make stationery, cards, and take classes and things like that. So that was just something that was important to me. Also, we had a destination wedding, so we needed more information to be included in our save the date, like hotel and booking, etc. So a standard invitation wouldn't work. And then I did actually order samples from a few online vendors, and when I received the sample, compared to the sample I received from my custom vendor, the quality was out of this world. And so it was definitely, I was getting what I paid for. And because we were having guests that were flying out of the country to our wedding, we wanted to be able to wow them. And we felt like the save the date would create a lot of anticipation and excitement, as well as the invitation. It just was kind of that process leading up to, because we did have an 18-month window of the date leading to getting to Mexico.
All right. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our guest for providing us with these candid responses. We have gotten a lot of very, very valuable information. I could tell by the comments that were and the size that you were hearing information that was certainly of value to you. Thank you all so very much. We cannot tell you how important it is for us to get this type of information so that we can make good business decisions, so that we have better clients, better relationships, and provide them with the best experience possible. Again, let's give them a round of applause.